Hello, I thought I'd do a quick tutorial on how to do a quick and simple animatic. I'm going to start a new Flash file. Let me switch to Essentials here. I'm just going to do some really basic stuff. So let's say that we are going to make a pizza, and we just want to animate a few steps on how to make a pizza. So we might start off with some text. So I'm just going to make a layer called text. I'm going to use the text tool, and I won't worry about font and such, but how to make a pizza. I'm just going to put that in the middle. And let's say that we want that. Let's see, what's our frame rate here? 24 frames per second. Let's maybe just do 30 so that it's easier to calculate time and stuff. How to make a pizza. Let's say we want this to be on here for 3 seconds, so we can go out to frame 90. I'm going to right click and insert a frame. But I actually might want to animate that too. So before we do anything with it, let's take it. I'm going to right click, and right off screen here it says convert to symbol. Sorry that gets cut off on the video there. Now I'll just call this text how to. Oops, and I wasn't paying attention. I made that a button. Let me undo that and do it again. You can also do symbol by going modify and convert to symbol. So text how to, and I'll make sure this is a graphic symbol. That will work best for most of our animations. Now that we've converted to a symbol, we can tween it. So what we're going to do is, now you can use motion tweens or classic tweens. Why don't we do a motion tween this time? So I actually want it to start off stage here and come down. So I put it on frame 1 and moved to that starting position first. And then I'm going to right click within the tween span here and create a motion tween. That turns blue. What we want to do is maybe it takes 1 second to move that down, so we'll move to frame 30, and then I'll put it to where I want it to be, and it animates that part, and then actually will stay there. Now we might, for the next step, we'll say maybe that starts at frame 120, or let's say that it stays there between up to frame 90, and then when the user clicks a button to go to the next spot, it will animate away. So I'm going to do a little trick to make a keyframe here, because at frame 90 I want it to still be in this spot. I only want it to start from this spot at frame 90 and then do something else. You'll see that if I just went to the end here and then moved it off, it doesn't work right, because it starts moving from the last keyframe all the way back here, and we don't want that. Between 40 and 90 I want it to stay put. So I'm going to hit Command Z on my Mac or Control Z a couple times to undo that keyframe. There, I think that got rid of it. Alright, so instead I'm just going to do a little trick. I'm going to go to frame 90, select the text. I'm going to use the arrow keys on my keyboard, and I'm just going to move up 1 pixel and then down 1 pixel. So I didn't really move it and change its position, but by doing that little trick, I now have a keyframe there. And then if I, let's say we make this fade out, we could animate it out, we could rotate it out, we could zoom it out. Let's maybe have it fade out. So we'll change the opacity. So select it, make sure you're in frame 120, go to color effect and go to alpha and bring that down to 0 to fade it away. We might have to go back Yeah, we'll have to go back because it's fading through the whole thing. So let's go back to frame 90 here and select it and go alpha 100. And I think that will, yeah, that'll take care of it. So now we can test our movie. I'm going to hit Command to return on my Mac. On a PC it'd be Control Enter. Let me reposition that there. So it just comes down and then fades away. So one thing you can do is you can add labels to identify the different parts of your movie, and this will be helpful too when we do navigation later. So for this first label, I just called this layer labels, and I usually like to keep this up at the top. Usually if I have action script, I'll put that at the very top and then labels below that. So I'll select this keyframe, and then in your properties panel you have a section called label, and I'll just put start there. Then that fades away there, so at frame 120 on that next frame, I'm going to do a label there, and it needs to have a keyframe. You'll see that those are just empty frames, so we can add that by right click and insert blank keyframe. Again, sorry, that's off screen, and then that fills in the in between, and then on this keyframe we can give it a label name and call that step 1. Now what you can start to do, you might start creating some folders for your different steps. That's kind of a good way to organize things. So this little icon down here creates folders. So I'm going to call this folder start. Now I'm going to drag this start text that I did and put it inside that folder. And then, like I said, I like my labels to be up top, so I'll just drag that. And I'm just dragging things to rearrange it. Now I'm going to make another folder, move this down to the bottom, and I'll call this step 1. Basically everything I'm going to do to step 1, see, like these folders you can kind of close and open, just kind of a good way to help organize. This is where I'm going to put all my step 1 stuff. So I'm going to create a new layer, make sure I drag it inside there, and I'm going to call this maybe step 1 text. And by default it has empty frames all the way up to here, but at this point I want something else to start showing up here. So I can right click as I've been doing, or you can actually, I like right clicking, but you can go to insert timeline blank keyframe, and that'll start a new keyframe there. So I'm going to do some text again, and I'm not going to do anything too complex. Sorry, I keep side scrolling over here. I might just say prepare the dough. Now we could animate that in or fade it in or something like that, or we might just want it to show up. That probably would be fine. You can use a combination of transitions. So I'm going to go out to frame 150, and for just actually for this whole step I want that text to just be sitting there. So let's say this whole step is 5 seconds. At 30 frames per second, that's 150 frames. So that would take us out to 270 if we were going to have a 5-second step. Now sometimes it's good to kind of figure out the timing. Let's see, probably here. Beforehand a little bit. I'm going to insert a blank keyframe, or I'm going to insert a frame, and what that'll do is that'll carry that text all the way down to here. So insert frame. We don't want a keyframe there. It's good to kind of get that timing worked out a little bit, but you can always kind of go back. Let's say, oh, I want it to be 250 instead. I can click on that frame there, hold the shift key, click on this frame to get that whole area, right click, and again off screen I have remove frames. So now it only goes up to this point. Let's say this is going to be the end of this one and the start of step 2 will be here, so I can actually go ahead and right click, insert blank keyframe, go up to my labels and say step 2, and that's where step 2 is going to start. You'll notice too that if you once you get some frames in here, you can actually see the labels here, which can be helpful. This one you can't see because I don't have enough frames showing yet, but I could right click and insert frame to see it if I wanted to. But there's our step 2, prepare the dough. That's going to be up for about 5 seconds. And then I might want to make a new layer. I'll put it into step 1, and this will actually be my dough graphic. And let's say the text is there by itself for a second, and then the dough is going to come in. So I'm going to click this single frame. I'm going to right click, insert a blank keyframe, and make sure you have that selected. Then I'm just going to draw a, this will be my dough. I'll not get too complicated with it here, but this could be a bitmap graphic or any sort of graphic you come up with. But there's our dough. Shows up at frame 150. Let's convert this to a symbol. So I select it, modify, convert to symbol. We'll call it dough. It's a graphic. Hit OK. Now we can animate or do something with it. In this case, we might want it to fade in. So let's say we take 1 second to do that, so 30 frames worth. I'm going to right click and insert a keyframe. So now I have 2 keyframes of the same thing, and now I can change what happens in between with the tween. Since I'm doing it this way, I kind of like to work with classic tweens a lot of the time because I can set my keyframes, my start point, my end point, and that kind of thing, and then sort of change what happens in between. So in this case, in frame at the start of it, I'm going to make my alpha, I'm going to select it on stage, go to my color effect alpha. I'm not going to bring it down to 0. I'm going to keep it at 10% so I can see it a little bit. Sometimes if you go, you can put it at 0, but sometimes you might not, you actually can't see it on stage when you do that, so you might lose track of it. So sometimes I like to just, I mean, you're already going from nothing to that, so it's kind of a little bit, just start it off with a little opacity. And then here, we already duplicated that keyframe with 100%, so it's already set. This time I'm going to do a classic tween, so right click in between here somewhere, create classic tween, and we now have our fade in. And that's how we're going to prepare the dough. Now, I could actually make this, you could actually do multiple steps too. Let's say we wanted to fade it in and move it. We could bring it in from the side here, start it over there, and it's fading and moving at the same time. Like I said, you can sort of retime things, so maybe we were like, oh, well, we don't need this to be on here for so long. You can drag your step 2 keyframe back. We want to get rid of these extra frames in here. So I can click that, hold shift, click the last one, right click, and remove frames. And I can get rid of this stuff here, right click, remove frames. Now this dough, actually we might want to keep that in there for the next step, for step 2. So let's actually, you can remove frames, but you can also extend them. So let's go to the end here, right click and insert frame, and that'll stay on stage. And then we can make a new folder for step 3. And I'll just sort of move this back down to where it needs to be. Now, if I wanted to, I could copy this and make new dough that's in step 3. So if you're sort of trying to organize everything, you might do it a little differently, but this will be okay. And I might call this step 3 text. Put that into step 3. Maybe another layer and call this step 3 graphics. And so we have our dough. This is where our new step begins. Oh, I'm sorry, this is step 2. I was calling that wrong. Rename those. And so we can right click, insert a blank keyframe, text, and this will be whatever step 2 is. You could put that text. Now you could animate that text in. We've covered that, convert it to a symbol. Either do motion tween or classic tween. And then maybe your graphics you have come in a little bit later, insert blank keyframe. And maybe in this case we might have some, some pepperonis that come down out of the sky and land on the pizza. You could animate these all individually, but it'd probably be simpler to grab all of these, right click, convert to symbol, and we could just make one symbol for all of these. It'll hold all of them together there. And then that's a symbol now. We can create a motion tween and maybe have them start up here and they end up down here. And that doesn't quite fit, although we could kind of scale that graphic and animate that as well. Whoops. Now, if you ever keep grabbing something you don't want to, you can use this lock layer to lock it temporarily. So as the pepperonis are coming down, they're scaling a little bit. That's another trick you can do. You can do some scale animations. Lands on the pizza and then stays there till the next step. So hopefully this will give you some ideas on how to do some basic tweening, some basic step-by-step animation. Later you could add buttons to this scene and we could jump from frame label to frame label to have some navigation from step to step.